Guys, today we're going to be talking about attachment styles within relationships, and the type of media that we chose was How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Basically, this movie is about Andy and Ben. Andy is a magazine writer who is trying to sabotage this relationship before it even begins, and Ben bets that he can fall in love with her in order to gain some advertising pitch that he's made. Basically, in the end, they realize that it was all a bet and end up falling in love with each other. This was released by Paramount Pictures in 2003 and is just a exaggerated rom-com about relationship stereotypes. Lastly, Andy portrays some stereotypical anxious attachment behavior, such as needy, clingy calls, kind of like putting out pink decor and hygiene feminine products to kind of make him uncomfortable. And Ben responds with an increased pursuit once Andy becomes a little bit emotionally unavailable. Thank y'all.
So for my part of the project, I'm going to be talking about misinformation in How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Firstly, emotional manipulation and clinginess and excessive jealousy are normal relationship behaviors. Although they're a little bit crazy sometimes and a bit exaggerated in the movie, lots of people in relationships act this way. So the exaggeration of these traits is misinformation and the connecting of it with anxious attachment, because not every person with anxious attachment will exhibit these stereotypical traits. Some further misinformation in the movie is that pursue withdrawal cycles and emotional availability are true romance rather than insecure attachment. So that grand gestures will fix everything in a relationship, that you can test and measure someone's love, and that men cannot commit to a long-term relationship. We know that this is not true in real life scenarios. And again, the movie is just very dramatic and exaggerated with the way that it portrays both sides of the relationships, one being very unavailable and one being very needy and attached. This is just a funny scene from the movie. It's a picture of Benjamin and Andy in couples therapy. And this scene kind of portrays Andy's crazy behavior. Um, and Benjamin is just very confused throughout the entire scene. So, why is this misinformation? Well, the first reason is that a lot of stuff that Andy exhibits, a lot of the traits, are personality traits. They're not necessarily attachment styles. She acts immature and clingy, and she's very vocal about how needy she is. But people with anxious attachment may not always be so vocal. They might be distant or overwhelmed when triggered. The second reason is that the movie implies that anxious attachment will ruin relationships. Of course, not every person can be fully responsive to a person with anxious attachment, especially if they are partnered with someone who has avoidant attachment, which links to lower relational satisfaction and emotional distress. But with a confident, secure partner, a person with anxious attachment can actually flourish.
Hi, my name is Kala. I'm going to be discussing both our strategies and our statements. So the first strategy that we picked was strategy 3 and how to address misinformation. So this was a multi-part strategy. It had 3 parts. The first part is the information biased and is this disclosed? So in general, the bias within information is not disclosed within the movies, and this can be due to many different factors. First one being is that media reflects current gender stereotypes and the objectification of women in society. Researchers such as Santa Nicola et al. 2023 and others have kind of confirmed that media does reflect current gender stereotypes and it portrays women generally in not a good light and exaggerates behaviors. The second part, how does this impact the information? There is an inaccurate portrayal of the anxious attachment style. And we see this in Andy's behaviors, in how she tries to drive Ben away within the movie. And researchers such as Sagan et al. 2023 have, described that most anxious attachment people do not have super extreme behaviors. And this generally inserts a bias within the movie. And this leads to stigmatization of women's health and behaviors within relationships. Men might expect women to act similarly to Andy, and this could lead to negative impacts. And this can mislead viewers into thinking that these behaviors are expected and or that they are romantic. Third part is does the viewpoint have a purpose for sharing disinformation? So our movie is published by Paramount Pictures, who does make profits off of rom-coms, and typically these rom-coms are not realistic and they have very exaggerated plots and they exaggerate women's behaviors. So As mentioned previously, Andy's portrayal of anxious behaviors are exaggerated in order to enhance the storyline, which they don't disclose, which essentially creates the misinformation. So, our statement one that follows the strategy that we picked in a conversation, I would say, I saw this movie as well, and the depiction of anxious attachment behaviors is very stereotypical. Media, including movies, reflect stereotypes and they typically objectify women. For reliable information regarding anxious attachment, please read this peer-reviewed article by Segon et al. 2023 regarding attachment styles and psychological well-being. Second strategy we picked was strategy seven. And this strategy was that it may be someone's personal experience, but that does not mean it is relevant to all. Are they transparent about this? So essentially, within the movie, Andy bases her actions on dating truths. And these directly stem from her personal experiences rather than evidence. She views that these personal observations in her dating life as if they apply to all men and all women, such as the idea that men are scared off by clinginess, jealousy, and women that are emotionally needy. Paramount Pictures is very not transparent about the exaggeration of her behaviors in the movie, and this is, for the sake of making an interesting plot, which they are not transparent about. And they also do not acknowledge how these behaviors are both extremely manipulative and exaggerated, which could negatively influence viewers in regards to their personal attachment styles and their behaviors within relationships. In our statement two that directly follows the strategy, I would mention in a conversation to a friend to address misinformation is that I've also heard the issue with movies using personal experiences and portraying them as examples of relationships and attachment styles. Media is known to be a biased source of information for information regarding relationships and attachment styles. This makes their portrayal of anxious attachment relationships not reliable. For reliable information regarding anxious attachment styles, please review the article by licensed psychologist Dr. Carly Cleany. All right, thank you so much.
So this slide is our slide about misinformation and impact. Staying in unhealthy / abusive relationships. One bullet point we had was meta-analysis shows the relationship between anxiety and intimate partner violence is significant, and that was corroborated by a source that we found. Another bullet point we have are normalizing and or displaying unhealthy anxious attachment behaviors depicted in the movie can have negative mental health impacts. For instance, that could lead to depression or failure to be able to respond to real relationships in real life. Changes to better represent attachment styles in relationships. For change number one, we have having a healthy relationship develop over time, not just in 10 days, as seen in the movie. Change number two would be not normalizing long-term relationships that began after a bet. Relationships that begin off friends or having like some sort of connection to friends is never a good sign in a relationship that you want to last. And finally, for change number three, we said promoting healthy relationships boundaries, which is a good thing, and not depicting stereotypical anxious behaviors or grand gestures. The series of questions we had were, in what ways could media sources like this movie lead others to emulate the depicted behaviors in real-world dating and relationships? Another question we say are, could the success of Andy's behavior in the movie lead women to believe that treating a man that way or this way would make him want to date her more? Why or why not? So the impact of our questions on our classmates could improve critical thinking and media literacy by helping them critically evaluate media as a biased source for depictions of attachment styles and relationships. And it could also inform others about the strengths of building healthy relationships. And these are the references to corroborate our research.